Let us begin our service with the prelude for ingathering. We're all going to be muted. Welcome. Everyone take a deep breath. Settle into your space as we listen to Scott playing Arabesque by Robert Schumann. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our community worship with the UUs of Charlottesville. It is so good to see your faces again, even if it's on the Zoom screen. I see old friends and new ones, families, neighbors, and some of you calling in from quite a distance. This has been a difficult, remarkable time. We have all aged this week. I felt it when I looked in the mirror this morning. And not just the 7 days since we last gathered, but we have all aged in what we have witnessed in our country, the range and depth of our emotions. But with age comes wisdom and perspective. We need each other. Let this be a time when we can stretch ourselves to strengthen community and work harder than ever to imagine the kind of world we can make together. We're glad to welcome all of you into this virtual sanctuary. It is together that we make this a place of celebration and solace, connection, and compassion. My name is Brett Gastinger. I'm honored to serve as a lay worship weaver this morning, along with our tech people, Sean Scally, Joanna Hickman. They are the true wizards working behind the scenes for us. We're also grateful to video editors Lucy Gilbert and Ellie Ransom for their gifts and contributions. Today, we're also very honored to welcome a guest minister joining Reverend Linda in our service, the Reverend Dr. Alvin Edwards. Dr. Edwards is the pastor of Mount Zion First African Baptist Church in Charlottesville for 39 years. Formerly a mayor of Charlottesville, he is presently the president of the Interfaith Charlottesville Clergy Collective. Now, please join in our opening hymn, This Little Light of Mine. And since we're all muted, don't be bashful, sing it loud, let your light shine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Even in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Even in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Even in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. When I see my neighbor coming, I'm gonna let it shine. When I see my neighbor coming, I'm gonna let it shine. When I see my neighbor coming, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hide it under a basket, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a basket, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a basket, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Don't you try to put it out, I'm gonna let it shine. Don't you try to put it out, I'm gonna let it shine. Don't you try to put it out, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, 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 let it shine.
We are the Garriott family. I am Beth.
And I'm Amaya.
We have been coming to this church as infrequent visitors for a year or two, and we've been pleased to get more involved in the last few months. What we love about being a part of this community is
seeing the friends and learning about them and learning with everyone.
And I love being amongst such caring and kind and compassionate people who happen to also be social justice warriors.
We light our chalice this morning, the symbol of our UU faith.
We gather this hour as celebration of the life we share together. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is a church of open minds. This is a church of helping hands. This is a church of loving hearts.
Our congregation's chalice has been lit and will have its own screen throughout the service.
If you have a chalice in your home, please light it now. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Reverend Linda. This past Wednesday, we saw what happens when people make bad choices about who to listen to and how to act. Years of lies and polarization, racism and injustice, vitriol and hatred led to shocking violence and stunning chaos on January 6th at our nation's capital. We saw again that history is not history, it is now. The history of violent white people forming posses to lynch Black people. 100 years after white mobs burned down the Black businesses of Tulsa and murdered hundreds. White people leaving a mess and destruction, and Black and brown and Asian people left to clean it up. That's what happened in our nation's capital this week. It is so easy to despair when we see the worst in human behavior. And unfortunately, we have seen a lot of it throughout our history. And now we see how it can rise again. In this worship service today, let us hold one another with all our different emotions, anger and sadness, confusion and clarity. And let us choose not to dwell on the evil, but rather to focus on the response that good people have had in the face of evil. James Baldwin said, "Not all that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." We remember all those people in our history and all those people today who face evil in our world, who face the difficult choices in life, and who find positive ways to imagine a better world, and who find ways to work to make those imaginations come true in their own lives and also for the lives of their neighbors and communities. We start very locally. A couple of weeks ago, I had a wonderful conversation with a leader right here in Charlottesville, Dr. Alvin Edwards. He's a successful and admired man, a husband, a devoted father and grandfather, a minister, formerly elected to the school board and mayor of Charlottesville. He's an interfaith leader, and he's someone who has received many, many awards. I wanted to know more about how he started out when he was young, when he was a little boy in Joliet, Illinois. So I asked him, when you were growing up, did you ever imagine that you would end up with the career you have had, that you would end up being such a leader?
Being a pastor or preacher was not in my thinking, my cards, and my dreams. I wanted to be an industrial engineer and make some money. And, and I was good at mechanical drawing and also at photography when I was a student in high school, because I was one of the yearbook photographers from my high school. And I started initially architectural drawing. And then one guy said to me, challenged me, said, "What do you think about industrial engineer? They're over the other engineers." I said, "No, I like that." So that's where I was headed. But I did have this yearning and desire in my heart to be a preacher. I had thought about it. And at my home church in Joliet, Illinois, where I was raised, and I had both my parents. I mean, I know nothing about being hungry without clothes, none of that. We always had. And my parents were both from Mississippi. And they were the ones who, I used to eat fresh everything when we would go to Mississippi. And so growing up, what happened was some of the two most influential people in my life in terms of church and ministry was my late father-in-law, Reverend Isaac Singleton Sr., and also my godfather, who's still alive, Reverend Perry Bennett. I worked for Perry Bennett. I call him my daddy. He's my godfather. And my late father-in-law called him Pop. And one time at a youth night service at church, he asked me, I used to extemporaneously get up and speak, and he asked me, he said, "You ever thought about preaching?" I said, "I don't want to be no preacher." I said, "I want to make me some money." And and I said, on top of that, I said, plus I cuss too much. So it was, I didn't want to do that. And so, but I had thought about it. I lied to him about it. And so the next day I went back up to his office and I said, "Hey, Pastor, I had thought about it." I said, "But with my mouth and cussing too much and all that," I said, "I don't think I need to be no preacher. It's not what I want to be." And so, we talked about it and we went back and forth. He said, "Well, maybe it'll help you to stop cussing." And not quite, but
Wow.
I'm much better about it. And it's nothing I brag about. And I tell anybody it's a nasty habit you don't want to develop.
Right.
And so he said, "Well, this is what you need to do." Went home and prayed about it. And so that night, God appeared to me in a dream and beckoned for me to come. And I remember it, my mom, I got up the next morning, my mom was washing dishes at the sink, and she had finished breakfast and cooking. And so I said, "Mom, I've been called to preach." And she says, "You have?" She said, "Well, I got me a doctor and I have me a preacher now."
Oh.
And so I, and that's really what happened, because I did not, no intentions. It wasn't on my radar screen to be a preacher.
It wasn't on his radar screen to be a preacher. I so appreciate Reverend Edwards' story, how he hadn't planned to become the leader he became, but how somehow it was something that arose out of the imagination and dreams of what might be. Like his story, there are millions of other stories among this congregation, those of you watching right now, in your families, in the world, stories of people who followed the calling to move beyond what they thought of themselves and found the courage to rise to do good in the world. Wednesday not only showed us the worst in human behavior in the invasion of the US Capitol, Wednesday also brought us the news that in the state of Georgia, through the long, hard work of many, the people of that state elected two people who follow in the footsteps of one of the greatest of our leaders, John Lewis. John Lewis worked for that day that happened Wednesday or Tuesday, but it was announced on Wednesday. John Lewis worked for over half a century. He died this past year, and he was in the minds and hearts of many of us this week. Here is John Lewis, a part of his story.
There is in each of us a dream.
Growing up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, I didn't like what I saw, and we had to change that.
For young John Robert Lewis, the dream inside him would empower him with vision to see beyond unspeakable horrors of present and past, to see the future, to challenge his times and change history. This tender-hearted and resourceful child, born on a farm in 1940, who everyone called Preacher.
Me working in the field, my mother would say, "Boy, you're falling behind, you need to catch up." And I said, "This is hard work." And she would say, "Boy, hard work never killed anybody." I said, "Well, it's about to kill me." So I learned to work hard, and I've been trying to keep up.
And at 15, the dream inside John Lewis ignited into a lifelong life force as he watched the news of the Montgomery bus boycott, feeding on the revolutionary ideas and ideals of Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. changed his life.
Rosa Parks and Dr. King taught me how to get involved. They inspired me. They helped to make me the person that I am today.
Young John Lewis.
This is the John Lewis who, with Dr. King and 4 others, organized the March on Washington, August 28, 1963. One of the dreamers on those steps in front of Lincoln.
Brother John Lewis.
The youngest speaker that day, 23 years old.
I saw the sea of humanity, and I just said to myself, this is it. I must give it all I have.
We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now. We shall splinter the segregated South into 1,000 pieces and put them together in the image of God and democracy. We must say, wake up, America, wake up.
Does the dream serve you, or do you serve the dream?
Your vote is precious, almost sacred. It is the most powerful non-violent tool we have to create a more perfect union.
Don't be so quiet. You too can bring about a nonviolent revolution.
Generations from now, when parents teach their children what is meant by courage, the story of John Lewis will come to mind. An American who knew that change could not wait for some other person or some other time.
There's 2 kinds of trouble. The bad kind, the kind that hurts people, that damages us all, that makes things worse. And then there's the good trouble of people speaking up and showing up and voting and insisting that justice must come to all. Let us all tell and listen to the stories of the good people in our lives who have had the imagination, the courage, the love to create the pathway that serves all people and that can make good trouble. I hold you all in my heart as we seek to find our way. We know that in the midst of the national news, we are also living our lives. Our own lives are filled with the joys and the sorrows of everything that happens to us all. Christine Gresser, will you please share with us some of those joys or sorrows that were sent in to be included in our service today? The pastor who was just elected to serve as one of Georgia's U.S. senators, the Reverend Raphael Warnock, said this on Wednesday. In this moment of unrest and violence and anger, he wrote, we must remember the words of Dr. King. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Let us, each of us, try to be a light to see our country out of this dark moment. And may this be our prayer today. Amen.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere.
Stunning and moving. Beautiful. Thank you. We will not give up. We will continue to seek and build the just world that we dare to imagine. This is the time in the service where you can respond to this community, to these prayers that have been shared, to these words that inspire. You can respond in your hearts and as you set your intentions for this week, and by sharing your financial gifts that help make this work together possible. We give thanks for all that you love, and we encourage you to be generous in putting your love into action with these gifts. May your donation, like your love, go out into the world. You can send a check in the mail, or if you prefer, online donations are also possible through the website using Breeze. Or my favorite is you can use this text in the link that's shown on the screen, 44321, give TJMC. Give it a try, it's actually really simple. Thank you. Your gifts to support this community and this work are so very welcome. Please join me in dedicating the offering now, saying these words. We accept your gifts with gratitude. May we use them wisely for the highest good.
Thank you, Breck, and thank you to Scott and the choir for the beautiful music before this offering. Even before I started my ministry with this congregation in August this past summer, one of the first people to reach out to me was Adam Slate, your former congregational president and now a seminarian and chaplain resident. He wanted to introduce me to the Interfaith Charlottesville Clergy Collective. The group was producing a video to commemorate the events of August 11th and 12th in 2017, and I was invited to offer a Unitarian Universalist word of inspiration. Through the Clergy Collective, I have gotten to know the Reverend Dr. Alvin Edwards, its founder and president. We've had a number of conversations since. Some of them have been just friendly and collegial, and some have been pretty deep and intense. I asked him if I could have a conversation with him to share with our congregation. And so I recorded this interview, and to be clear, it was recorded before January 6th. I had this conversation because getting to know him, I realized I really wanted to learn his story and to ask him about how he had come to do the work he's done, and to find in his story the sermon that his life can be for all of us. You saw a part of our conversation earlier in the service when I asked about his growing up. This part of the recording starts with me asking how many years ago he came to Charlottesville.
Well, I came to Charlottesville in 1981. I took
Mm-hmm.
over Mount Zion July 81. I graduated from Virginia Union School of Theology with the Master of Divinity degree, and I was pastoring. My first church was in a place called King and Queen County, a little place called Little Plymouth, Virginia, which is kind of east-west of here. You get off at the West Point exit, go down there and come back west a little bit. But it was a good church, and loved them. But that was my first church. And I was there 4.5 years, and then Mount Zion called me.
Yeah, well, you know what? 81 is 40 years ago.
It is. It'll be.
You're going to have your 40th anniversary in July.
Next year, and
so if you're planning a party, let us know. We'll come.
Well, we are planning a party, and we will let you know.
Great.
Because they'll do a luncheon, and they'll do special things on Sundays, and for the month of August is when I think it's going to be.
Wonderful, wonderful. So while you were pastoring this church, at some point you got involved with the event Charlottesville leadership.
Yes.
And how did you match being a pastor with being a community leader? Member of city council and even mayor, right?
Yeah, yes, and chairman of the school board. Well, you know what? It's in our culture, one of the freest persons is the pastor. And because nobody can, I would never miss a meal, and I would never be without shelter. I didn't have to worry about that. Members would always make sure they take care of me here in Charlottesville, all over the country. And so being involved was kind of like my call. It gnawed at me. It haunted me. And because I never dreamed of being mayor, never dreamed of being on city council, but I came, and I began with the Alliance for Interfaith Ministries. And from there, I got involved politically. And then at that time, the Democratic Party asked me to consider running. Thought about it, talked with my late father-in-law, who was very politically active, by the way. He brought the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to Joliet, Illinois. We also had the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who helped to start a chapter of Operation Push in Joliet. And that's where I really got to meet Reverend Jackson. Never got to meet Dr. King, but that's where I got to meet them. But, I watched him, I observed him. And then the other thing is true that a lot of people know, in 1965, the city of Joliet, they built two other schools beside Joliet Central. And so Central was where everybody in Joliet would attend. But then the school got so big, they decided to build a Joliet East and a Joliet West. I went to Joliet West, where there was only 100 Blacks in the school. And my 4 years of high school was all race riots.
Wow.
Every year we had a race riot.
What an education.
Yeah. And, and I kind of got involved with that. And my late father-in-law, he was always over there. And it was crazy because the police really came after the Blacks instead of the whites, it was just interesting. It was an interesting day. One of my best friends became president of student council, and I became chairman of human relations committee.
Wow.
Back in high school. And that was one of the things we talked about.
Yeah.
And his name is Richard Fazio. And so Richard and I we call him Chunky. Chunky and I got really close, but we still talk today. We went to our 50th year class reunion this year rather. And so we talked about what used to be and what we went through. And I remember he came to Mount Zion, and he was a Catholic. And my church at home is very loud, I shouldn't say real loud. It's not loud, but it's very demonstrative. People participate in worship. It's the amen and it's hallelujah, what have you. Chunky had never seen that before.
Oh, wow.
Especially some woman stood up and said hallelujah. It shocked him.
Yeah.
But it was a learning experience, and he said he enjoyed being there. And I went to the Catholic church too. And so we exchanged, we did stuff like that. He and I.
That's
and
wonderful.
became close. And matter of fact, he told me he even listens to me now on YouTube.
Great.
He's always appreciated it. He said, listen to me preach.
That's
Bless
wonderful.
the Lord for that. So
Yeah.
anyway, so my high school was spent those 4 years, and that, so we were always kind of taught that your faith means you need to be involved in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the examples we always talked about, that Jesus always went where the sinners were.
That's right.
He never went where the folks had it all together.
That's right.
He went where the sinners were. And so wherever there is a need, I'd always find myself involved and work to fix it.
Wonderful. And so, you know, being a pastor and also being a mayor or being the chairman of the school board was just your way of extending your ministry.
Exactly. And so it's, you know, I think about some of even the counselors who had some challenges, you know, would you pray with me? And
wow.
And so I would do that, you know, and it wasn't anything I would force on them, because I believe if people see your life or the light in your life, the presence of God in your life, they'll respond to it and respect it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wish I don't forget, I took one of the counselors, we used to play basketball together, and I took him to the hospital, to the emergency room. Something had happened, and I stayed with him. He thought that was the greatest thing in the world. I just thought it was part of my ministry. I mean,
oh, that's wonderful.
He just thought that was, so, you know, he was surprised at it. But, you know, as one guy who used to live here said to me, he said, Alvin, you taught me how to give. And he says, you always give. And he says, I can tell it's not without any ulterior motives.
Yeah.
And I said, I give because somebody gave to me. And I realized, had my father-in-law, had not my godfather or my parents not poured what they poured into me, I wouldn't be where I am today.
So out of gratitude for that gift, you turn around and give to others.
Yes.
So I have watched you working just a little bit since I've arrived in Charlottesville, and realized that while you are strong in your own faith, you have deep respect for other people's faith. You work with the Charlottesville Clergy Collective, which include people of many different faiths. And tell me a little bit about how the Charlottesville Clergy Collective got started and what your role has been in that.
Well, right after Mother Emanuel, the killings down in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
I don't know, George Morris and a couple of us were talking, and talked about we ought to get together and talk. And so when we did, he called some friends, other denominations, what have you, and I invited some people. And the question I asked them, if what happened at Mother Emanuel had happened here at Mount Zion First African Baptist Church, how many of you think I would have called you? And so we went around, and I told them, not one of you. And they were surprised. And I said, well, why? I don't know why you would be surprised. I don't know you. You all stay isolated to yourselves. You know, you keep your aquarium, and that's where you remain. You know, but for me, when I've tried to do some things, it hasn't happened. It didn't happen, you know, with other denominations or other churches. And so I've always been a firm believer that you work with those who want to work and who want to go after some of the ills in society. My late father-in-law did the same thing. And so it kind of chip off the old block. But so we did that, you know, and so we had a couple of breakfasts, you know, and I hosted them, and so eventually we decided we, at the anniversary of Mother Emanuel's killings, we decided to have, we read a statement, then we decided to talk about forming together. And we came together, and, you know, and I became president. I've been president since the founding of it. So this is my last year. And But it's been good because, see, you can sit and argue about 10% of the stuff you don't agree, but the 90% you agree on, in my opinion, that's what you focus on.
Right.
You know, if people are comfortable in their faith, I'm okay with it. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, for me, if we want to impact the lives of some children, of some people in need, of the homeless, we agree on that, go after it. You know, just like one of the things about the back to school bash that we do every year, we've done it at the downtown mall. We haven't been able to do it the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we've done is that we require parents to come. A parent or guardian has to show up. And it gives other churches, other faiths, an opportunity to talk to people who come.
That's right. That's right.
And,
right.
you know, they had a chance to meet their teachers, their principals. I mean, it was an opportunity for relationship building.
Real community and relationships. The other thing I was aware of is that this collective that you created a number of years ago was able, because they had started to get to know each other, to show up in solidarity when the synagogue was under attack in 2017, was it?
We did. And I mean, when the Ku Klux Klan, we were there. And it was interesting too, because my honest opinion is that I felt like if nobody showed up at the Ku Klux Klan rally, that would make a major statement. But no, they voted me down. And we had a group who went there. We had another group who stayed and prayed, another group who went down to another venue. And that was okay. I was okay with that. I don't get mad at people because they vote me down on something, you know, but it was just interesting. The number of people, they wanted to fight, so they went. And so
it meant something to the people in the synagogue, I'm sure, too.
Yes, right. Yeah. You know, and then I remember that when they had the threats for the people at the temple, one of the members said, when the clergy collective members showed up at their service on that Friday, they said, we never knew people cared. And that person was from the Holocaust. And it was, I mean, that was just a major statement, because one of the things about the clergy collective, we do show compassion. We want to make sure that we build support for people to let people know that we care. That's wonderful. That is so powerful. So, and this is a month in our congregation where we're going to be talking about imagination. What would be, in your greatest imagination, what could be the possibilities of true interfaith engagement in Charlottesville? What could you imagine happening? One of the things I think that needs to happen is that they need to be seen together. And presence and participating across denominational lines can send a good message. It will help to take some of the junk that people carry around, you know, and false notions. And I tell people all the time, you know, if you come from what you believe, then you do that. You stay there. I'm okay with that. But what we're working on is making sure a child can read and write. That's what I'm after. And making sure that people are treated fairly. That's what I'm concerned about. And that justice for everybody. And so if we were a visible and present interfaith community, we could actually make these dreams come true. Yes. So I so appreciate, Pastor Edwards, your being willing to speak with us. And I just wonder, do you have any kind of message or sermon? I didn't ask you to preach a sermon, but if you did, can you tell me in a few sentences maybe, what message would you love the Unitarian Universalists of Charlottesville to hear? Well, even though we're in this COVID crisis, I believe we need to continue to show compassion toward one another, to make sure that people experience love and care, and that they know something about peace from us. I often say to people that there's a poem I learned years ago growing up says a song is not a song until you sing it. A bell is not a bell until you ring it. Said love is not put there to stay. Love is not until you give it away.
Till you give it away.
And so we've been blessed with a gift, and gifts are meant to give. And so even in this season of giving, let's give people a gift, a gift that can make them feel whole and loved.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Pastor Alvin Edwards.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share with you. And one more thing too, the CCC will be having a retreat. And, you know, this year, as we did last year, I called it Imaginuity, just to give people some fluid expressions to dream, to imagine, think of what could be, and don't tell me about what can't be.
What could be, not what can't be. Thank you, Pastor Edwards. I'm always inspired to hear the life stories of people who have found a way to show up, to choose the right action, and to focus on the needs of their neighbors. That is a powerful sermon for us all. Our lives are the sermon we preach to one another. And I hope we can hold Dr. Edwards' vision of ingenuity in our hearts today as we weave together our individual stories into a new and powerful community story. This week, the discord in our nation rose to a loud volume of clanging and banging and shouting and shooting. Our mission, if we choose to accept it, is to discover together how we can make harmony together rather than discord. Pastor Edwards reminds us, a bell's not a bell without ringing. A song's not a song without singing. And love isn't love till you give it away. As we extinguish our chalices, may the light within continue to shine. And may your days be dedicated to making sweet harmony with the bells, the songs, and the love that we can give to one another. Amen.